On the Sofa with Esther throughout the month of August, we'll be featuring hip-hop artists as we celebrate 50 years of hip-hop. Our first guest will be those who knew Phase 2, who was the foremost voice for artistic integrity and historical truth within the writing and hip-hop movement. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am at the ACA Gallery in New York. Yes, I'm in New York, and I'm here to talk about an incredible artist called Phase 2. Now, both these gentlemen have worked, or they know of him in such an in-depth way, and so we're going to talk about the exhibition, but find out a little bit more about these two gentlemen. So, the gentleman in the cap.
What's going on? My name is Midus, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be here seeing this exhibition of Phase 2.
Okay, and what's been your involvement with the exhibition, Midus?
Well, I developed like a friendship, kind of like a mentorship with Phase like around 2015, mostly about dancing, and yeah, we developed a close relationship, to the point where before he passed away, he did a series of sketches and poems from essentially his hospital bed, and he sent those to me with the intent of like putting them out as a book. Mm-hmm. So I helped with that process, and I wrote a section of this catalog here for this exhibit about Phase 2's dance contributions.
Brilliant.
So yeah, on those two fronts, I would say my connection, but I don't really have a big connection. This is all Phase's work. I'm more here as a fan, just to observe and take it in.
Thank you.
I'm Coco 144. I'm an aerosol writer from the early 70s. Met Phase in 1973 and was a part of the aerosol movement, not only painting on trains but also making the transition from the subways onto canvas. Having our very first show of the culture in late September 1973 in New York. So I also have the privilege of writing a piece in the catalog for this exhibit. Yeah, he's a lifelong friend, and for me, he still lives.
Mm. Yes. And what was it about him that was quite unique? Because when I've watched a lot of what he spoke about and his work, he was quite before his time, would you say?
Very, very much before his time. Genius, the architect of this movement. He's built the foundation. In my humble opinion, everything that's incorporated or that's being practiced in the aerosol culture has been on the foundation that Phase has built.
Mm. And would you say the same thing?
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better than that from someone like Coco. I can't really speak too much about his art, but I accept just the inspiration I take from it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as far as a dancer, as far as the aesthetics he laid down on hip hop flyers, you just give so many examples, like the IGT thing he worked on. So many firsts, so many trends that he set, all up until his passing, he's just full of creativity and innovation.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to walk around the gallery and just talk about some of his pieces. Yeah. Okay, so Midus, tell us a little bit about the book that you've produced.
So Phase 2, he passed away unfortunately from ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and for anybody who knows about that disease, it debilitates your motor function slowly, and you start losing, just the ability to move different limbs and different things like that. So he actually lost his function in his right hand, which is right-handed. So with his left hand, just in a hospital bed, he did like a series of sketches and poems. And this book is a collection of them because he sent them to me and asked me to help him publish it, to transcribe it, arrange it, and we got to communicate through text message in his final days. He sent these, drawings and stuff to me. And these are 3 of the examples from what he actually did in the hospital. And yeah, you can see his own little calligraphic script that he developed. You can see his silhouette. You can see these fish turned into spiky crustacean. It's just he was exploring different concepts and movement and ideas and lettering, and putting it into the book. Each page is a poem and then one of these drawings. So you can see this here is that original right there.
And what did that do for you as well? Because we're always inspired by those around us, and even in the hospital, you said was it right-handed?
Yeah.
And then he used his left hand, so it just showed something about a character that was
100%.
incredible.
100%. He sent me a text which I think summarizes who he was especially at this point in his life. He sent me these sketches and, also just different things. And one thing he sent me is a Wikipedia entry for the concept of, overcoming something with will,
Wow.
mind over matter, basically, that whole concept. And it's just, like you said, it just represents who he was in the sense of even at the worst, stage where people would give up, he's finding a way to create and do, create something out of nothing kind of thing, up until his literal last breath.
Wow.
So that spirit of just, yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what the proper word is for that, but yeah, this just not letting something stop him.
Spirit of purpose, I feel. And just like I said before, when you listen to how he articulated himself, when you listen to where he was drawing that information down from, he was able to sort of unpeel, unpick, and then creatively put it back together in a way that was still beyond his time.
Beyond his time is this exhibit is beautiful in the sense of right here, this is one of the first canvases he did, right, in '73. And then these are the sketches he did prior to his passing. You see that span of work here, and you can see that beyond his time effect and everything he did, And he never stopped pushing the envelope. That to me, those 2 things stand out as even beyond his art, the inspiration he gave, that relentless creativity, innovation up until his final days, and that making something out of nothing.
That's it.
Effect,
That is it. Thank you, Midus. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to Coco now, who has been in the industry for a very long time, and he's a legend in his own right as well. But can you just share a bit more about your working and your relationship with Phase 2? And then we're going to look at this particular piece, and if you can just explain, just explain a bit about that as well, Coco.
Faze and I, we met in 1973, and we met at a point where we stopped painting on trains, or I stopped painting on trains or writing my name on trains and started painting on canvas. So we go back from a artist collective from 1973, went by UGA. This piece right here, the Softy piece, is actually he created for the first exhibit that we did in September 1973 at the ACA Gallery. Down in Soho, in West Manhattan. And it's basically his signature, just signature, and he made it bigger. He blew it up, basically he blew it up, and what he called the Softy. Faze, like I mentioned before, he's the architect. He built the foundation for the aerosol movement, and you can see how his work has evolved in the show. The last 50 years of his work.
And we were talking about this piece earlier on in terms of he took his he drew reference to the kung fu. Is it kung fu culture? He,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, he was a kung fu head. He was very much into the martial arts, Asian culture, Asian art, and as you can see in some of his work, there's dragons, there's swords, there's arrows, which influenced him.
Do you feel if this is saying something, or it's just about this portal of creativity that?
I think that I feel that it's saying a lot of things that I'm not sure if everybody can translate it. Faze was kind of cryptic at times and silent about a lot of things, but as any other genius, that mind was cooking, was working all the time. I never met anybody that was non-stop working like all the time. He was a machine, other than a human, but you know, he was just constantly putting work out.
Let's take a look at this one. And do these pieces have names, or?
They do have names. I mean, he's also, you know, he incorporated a lot of lettering. He was, you know, he went back to Egypt also, you know, and translating some of his work, or translating what he envisioned from the Egyptian culture to, you know, today's modern culture, or his form of expressing his letters, his writings, his calligraphy. It doesn't necessarily have to have our version of letters, of the alphabet. He created his own alphabet also. He created his own symbols.
So let's take a look at some more of his work. Oh, you can really see the dragons in this one, can't you? The dragon's eye. And there's something about the eyes as well, I guess, you know, being
sort
seen.
Of like eyes with larger eyes, and sort of distorts it at the same time.
Being seen but not being seen, in a sense, isn't it?
At the same time, it has symmetry, you know, the way he's balanced things.
And this piece, there we go again with the eyes, and I like the colours, and the colours are really vibrant as well.
I feel that, to me, this is one of my favorites, and one of the more vibrant pieces in the show. And Faze always expressed to me, he said, I'm not good at colors, I'm better with lines, but I beg to differ.
This is really
Yeah,
quite
good
something.
choice of color combination.
And then these smaller pieces, it's almost like the contrast, but the concept is still strongly there.
Yeah. I never got to see these pieces until this show, so I called it part of his secret weapon collection.
And Coco, what has Faze left for you personally? You know, working with him, understanding him, as well as your own self. What's the legacy that he's left for you, or what's the impact?
I mean, besides all the love that he shared with me, tenacity. Also, don't let anybody put a label on your work. You know, it's like just, there's no limits. There's no limits.
Excellent.
There's no limits in life. Just continue working and paint what you want to paint. Paint out of your heart.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I finish this story of how I first got to know Faze. Because I interviewed him in that second issue. And it was the UGA guys. So it was the first issue. I had some young kids that were like 15 years old painting trains. I had some more seasoned, maybe late teens. that were more seasoned on the trains. But I was really interested in those early guys because I realized that this history had an art. This art had a history. Being here in the early 70s, it wasn't new by the early 80s. I mean, it had been going on for a decade. So I said, well, I'd be interested to get some of these older guys and see what they think about it. Where are they now? So that second issue, the UGA guys, which you spoke with Coco.
That's right.
That was
yes.
that first generation that painted not on the trains, pieces on the trains, and on canvas. 72, 73. I'm sorry, 73, 74. And so I was interviewing Coco and Bama and Rick Gary, and phase 2, he came late, he walked in the room, and everything kind of stopped. He had that kind of presence. And he said, you know, I interviewed him, and I said, okay guys, I'm going to transcribe this, I'm going to send everybody a copy, and you're going to edit your own work. I don't want to print anything that you don't want me to print. But everybody was, you know, you spelled this wrong, you got this wrong. But Faze went through the whole thing. So immediately I realized here's somebody who's totally different. He really wanted to have that whole control of his narrative. So that really built this whole kind of relationship with him. You know, occasionally calling on the phone. He would have a show and I would see him. And we built this trust. So 2 years later, when he came to me and said, I wanted to do the art direction for your publication, I said, yeah, great.
And, you know, his passing, what did that do for you? Because he was, like I said before, he was before his time. He brought so much to the table, so much that was different and fresh and new, but also mixing it with, it's almost like that, something old, something new.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he started out as this like art director. This is like 86 for the publication. But he was really a co-editor, and we really became partners. And we did shows, we did tours, we did, you know, publications. We brought other people involved, and so the whole art scene started happening in the West Coast, Europe, Hawaii, Australia, and we just had this we just built this kind of relationship. Like I like to use the word partner. It's like it's like a relationship. It's like I don't know what to say. I became a friend, and I became a confidant. So he always could say, "Oh yeah, I can trust you." You know, I had a couple places downtown. We would work together. He'd feed my cats when I disappeared. I got to know his kids. You know, I got to, you know, as little. I didn't get to know them, but I met them, and so we built this kind of relationship. So I'm saying, by the time we went through several stages of shows, events, I stepped away from. I had to close the publication, but the time I closed, I'm also a filmmaker. I have my own art that I'm doing that's somewhat separated from this. So this was always a kind of another, it's part of the art world, it's part of the modern art world. It's part of my life in New York, relating to other artists. I don't know what to say. His passing was, I was the one kind of holding the bag. You know, I had a lot of his art. I was involved with a couple of his studios, and then when he lost his studios, I opened up a storage unit. We always did some kind of business. Again, we were partners in that kind of way, that we were like brothers from another mother kind of way. So I was quite involved with the show by basically having a lot of things. And he actually directed the last part of his life to bring his artwork into this gallery. that's the other thing. I didn't bring, he was brought into the gallery by other people. It was very important. This is type of a legacy gallery. It wasn't interested in labeling with Faye's. Faye always wanted to control his narrative. He had this whole thing about being labeled.
And what do you?
And I think at the end he just wanted to be an artist. I mean, it was one thing. This has this legacy of American art, African American art. It has this kind of thing, but definitely not graffiti art.
Okay,
It was kind of like a street, not even street. It's like kind of art. But Faye's kind of, it was the best thing. It's like, Faye, this is it. You know, this is what the art can speak for itself. You'll put in a category that you're not labeled this way or that way.
And what do you feel he's left for other artists?
I'm sorry?
What do you feel his work, his legacy, leaves for other artists and just humanity?
He was his own person. I mean, he was an advocate as much as anything else. I mean, you look at some of the art here. I mean, he's always evolving, and that's what he would say too. The culture, even though so much he's put into urban culture, what people would define as hip hop. I mean, it's a very broad term, a very, very broad term. It's evolving. It's always evolving. It's always a gumbo, mixing things up. It's always a new generation. And I think he speaks to the future. Like he said, his name, phase 2. It's the first step. 1 is the beginning, 2 is the next step. 2 is forever. I mean, he had that kind of mind. He was never going to remain the same, and that you're not going to define him, but let the art speak to you. I think he speaks very, like I say, an advocate. He in all of this art movement, the urban spray paint, wild style writing movement, aerosol, Alex, he called it. He even moved away from it at the end. He called himself he was always a drafts person. He said, I'm really, if it wasn't for the trains, you know, my weapon of what do you call it, art, the weapon of art would be a pen, you know, a marker. He drew, he liked to draw, he liked to do it. And you see that in his later paintings, that he actually moved away from that whole painting aspect of painting a line. It was so instrumental of painting a line when it came to style writing, of doing that art form, laying that foundation with spray paint, with the letters, bringing the letters together, creating the kind of style, you know, these kind of formats into the lettering.
Okay.
And he moved, he was, at the end of his life, he was really interested in you know, it was always language to him. It was always symbols to him. And he had to deal with what was inside of him. He was speaking to himself.
Wow.
If I can say that well.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. But this is what he would call the softy. 1973, one of the first paintings spray paint on canvas. He was doing this on the trains. What was being done on the trains was more straight lettering, large signatures. He started rounding off the edges, making it kind of have this kind of conceptual flow. It really began a kind of this aesthetic, I think, a really aesthetic of paint and lettering. This is amazing, the 73. This is, I mean, he's already, you know, putting the E in front of the H, and that was what he was going as a signature also. But then we do this kind of a logo style that happened months later that he's well known for. I don't see a logo style. But by he's kind of stopped painting, was really into the graphic work of the flyers in the late 70s, early 80s, the hip hop flyers, the birth of hip hop. the Bronx and Harlem, and also downtown. And he was on that first show, the European show, when I was 82. When he came back to painting, he started going into his abstract style. So it was kind of abstracting the letters.
Okay.
So this would be more of like the late 80s. Does it say something? I think he was really going into the abstraction of how just a letter or how a symbol can stand by itself. He always went back to style writing, and you would see these things that, like these pieces would be the style writing pieces. Actually, he would define certain letters out of it and saying something. They always say this way, Riff. I always sometimes have to ask Riff, this says Palo or it says pain? Did they say what this said?
No, they didn't. No.
I think it's Palo. There's definitely letters or some kind of abstraction of the letters here. And it's definitely, this is in the last decade of his life, but he did this because people wanted it. This is a Palo piece, the P-A-L-O.
Palo piece.
People liked this, and he had a market for it. People like that style writing, that go, okay, this is style writing. This was actually done by marker too. There's a little bit of spray paint, as you see, he has a reference. But it's really, he worked in a small space. You would have to see his walls that would happen, in the 2000s, the 90s, 2000s, where he's really painting with spray paint.
Okay.
His last canvases, he really made a point of these last canvases here.
This one,
He did about a dozen. And he's really moving away from paint altogether. I mean, there's acrylic paint, but the marker is, and there's also kind of symbolism in here too. He's working in a small space. Unfortunately, the integrity of the artist. I mean, he painted what he wanted to paint, and he sold who he wanted to paint. He really wanted this stuff to speak for itself without being labeled.
Okay. Because I've asked that question before in one of the interviews in terms of the interpretation. But like you said,
you always like to have that. I mean, there's definitely certain kind of, you have the several eyes, the claws, there's definitely things that could, what do you say, recognizable things. I can't say the word.
okay.
You would repeat kind of the stuff, bars. Again, it has to do with his, what he's communicating with himself to me.
Thank you, David. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman's name is Riff.
Riff 170.
Riff 170. So Riff, how did you know or meet Phase 2? What was your
I was with these two brothers that introduced me to the culture from my way, Chris and Bonanza, and they told me I had a great handwriting. Did I ever do motion tag? And I said, motion what? So they took me and they showed me at Jerome Avenue and 170th Street. We got on the train and they gave me a dry marker, which was these little markers, but they, you could screw off the top and put ink in them. And I tagged up, and they was like, they kept saying, you gotta get a name for yourself. You just can't go out there tagging. That's how I became so multi-faceted with different names, because I started out with different names. But Riff, they told me I had to get a name that described who I was, and I was always reading a book or something when I was with them. So that's how Riff 170 came about.
Okay.
But being with Phase used to always tell me, don't go into the yard by yourself and be careful when you go there because anything can happen. That's how he mentored me. He made sure I was safe at all times.
Okay.
But as a hard-headed kid, you know, we don't always listen to everything. So a few times I didn't listen to him, and I got the end results, and I looked at him and he said, "See, I told you so." And that was important to me, that he was always looking out for my best interests.
And what was unique about Phase 2? What was it that drew you to him?
What drew me to him, because I liked his hand style for his letter, for his name, Phase 2. And he was like one of the well-known persons of the culture when I was coming out in '71. And he was like a superstar in the culture already. So when Chris and Bonanza told me, "Yo, you can't go talk to them guys, them are the guys. Those are like the kings, the kings. So you just can't walk over there and talk to them." And I said, "What do you mean I can't go over there and talk to them?" So I walked over there and I introduced myself. I said, "Excuse me, Phase, I would like to introduce myself." And he said, "So what do you tag?" And I said, "Riff." No, I didn't say nothing. I wrote it down, and he said, "Riss, R-I-S-S." I said, "No, those are F's. See, the line goes through and drops down." And he's like, "Okay, Riff." He said, "Why did you write that?" I said, "Reading is fundamentally fantastic. That's why I wrote that." And he said, "Wow, that's kind of deep that you told me what it really meant." And I said, "Yeah, reading is fundamentally fantastic." And I read a lot, so I had to get something that really describes who I was. And that's what described who I was. And my other names like Worm and Boy and Dove and Mr. Six and all of them came from different ideas that was running through my mind that if I could do the whole alphabet, you know, and that's what I wanted to do. And if I would have showed them my book yesterday, because I had my book with me, they got to see it yesterday with all my different drawings in there, and they was like, "Yo, you real versed in different letters." I said, "Whatever I touch, I try to turn to gold, you know." But
It's a bit
that's
like
the thing
Phase
of
as
being,
well, because it was a bit like Phase in terms of that creativity.
yeah.
And
It was each one teach one with us.
Yes.
We fed off of each other, me and Phase. I did the more complicated letters. As you could see, if you go on my site on Instagram, you'll see in the beginning, Phase was doing simple letters such as that, and mine was more technical. And people start going, "Yo, Riff is, I don't know what Riff is thinking. He's just doing stuff." I said, "I'm not thinking. I'm just enjoying and doing what I do. I want to be different. So this is what makes me different. Just doing things."
Vessel number 9, nostalgic 80s funk soul brand, housing the finest videos, stories and interviews from key movers and shakers in this defining era of audio magnitude, including funk soul DJ-led events, showcasing precision playlists and much more.